Let's begin.
Ms. Broussard, isn't it true that the reason you're afraid of me has nothing to do with the things that you're talking about, but rather that I have intimate knowledge of you helping Denise finesse the legal system, both in Washington County and attempting to do it in Clark County, as you prepared all of her documents, counseled with her? Is that not true?
That's not true.
Ms. Broussard, you say that at some point in your corrections position with Washington County, that did I hear you say that you had some 70 employees under you? Could you elaborate on that? People that worked for you or under you or you were associated with?
I ran a volunteer graduate intern program, and there were never 70. There were a number of graduate students, usually between 15 and 20, and another 20 or so volunteers from different not high school, but colleges. But I never had employees under me.
So you've never had employees working for you?
Oh, I've had them in the past, and I have them now. But when I was at Washington County is what you're asking.
Okay. If you had employees that were working for you, and you found out that one of them was involved in a kidnapping plot and was trying to finesse the system and encouraging a person to actually go to jail for contempt of court, if you heard about that as the employer, what do you think you would do with that employee?
I would have a discussion with that employee.
Isn't it true that as a Washington County employee in corrections, that even if you hear of sexual molestation, you're required to report it?
The source of you being the source, I would not believe it.
Oh, so you're not required to report
I'm a
sexual molestation
I am.
only if you don't like the source.
No.
Is that what
I
you
didn't
just
say-
said?
No, I didn't say that. I said you. I used you, not the source. You being the source.
Yet all the information you've already testified to has been hearsay from Ms. Martin, that you have no direct knowledge of any abuse by me. Is that not true?
I do have direct knowledge. I've
Knowledge,
testified to
something
that.
that you've seen with your own
Yes,
eyes.
I've seen you be abusive.
Abusive.
And I've experienced your energy
Right?
directly.
Energy.
Yes.
Is it mystical energy?
It's abusive energy, sir.
Oh.
It's
And
threatening
explain
to me.
abusive energy.
It's threatening to me. That
Why? Why is it threatening to
Because it frightens me. I feel unsafe in your presence.
you? So when you came to my home, when I lived in Vancouver, and we were having some kind of family get-together, why did you come if you were so threatened by me?
I came because of your child and for Denise, not for you.
Not for me.
And in public, most often, abusers are not going to do harm in terms of violence, but the energy is there with you all the time for me.
So you said that you have read the book Eating My Way to Heaven thoroughly.
I do.
There's a chapter in that book that describes violence of Patrick against Denise Martin several times. Yet right now, this person who is a violent person that you have knowledge of is what? With my child right now? And so since you have that knowledge, since you said that you have intimate information about the book, why wouldn't you investigate sexual abuse allegations against him?
Because Patrick and the book and that chapter are many years ago. That wasn't in present time.
Not in present time.
No.
Is it not true that in that
God.
book that he repeatedly assaulted her and other women? Since you're a woman who is involved in domestic violence against women, doesn't that bother you?
Of course it bothers me.
So then why wouldn't you investigate and report alleged sexual abuse by this man against my child and your grandson?
It came from a source, you, sir.
So
And I
the
don't.
problem is Mr. McEachran can assault her, other women, sexual abuse my son, but because the information comes from the son's father, me, you ignore it.
Right.
Wow.
Wow.
You really do
Indeed.
hate me, don't you?
I don't hate you.
Really?
You must hate thinking about me then.
Back in November of 2001, there was a Christmas get-together at the church that Denise went to in Wilsonville. You attended that. That was the first time that I ever met you. Is that correct?
No, it is not.
When was the first time I met you?
At the comedy club downtown.
Okay, that could be.
It was. I remember so well.
Do you remember when Denise and I were at the church in Wilsonville? There was an issue about me inviting her after the church to go to dinner, and you protested because she had promised to sleep with you that night. Do you remember that?
Objection.
Objections overruled. Answer the question.
I did not. I say that again. I said what? Please.
That you
respond.
objected her going with me after the church ceremony because we were going to go to dinner, maybe a movie, and then who knows
12
else.
o'clock at night, by the way.
And you objected because she had promised to spend the night with you. Do you remember that?
I remember the incident, and I remember that I said it was all right for her to go. She and I had made plans to go with Stacy to a house that they were staying in, and I was her transporter, and we were there together, and then you showed up. I remember all that.
At midnight.
It was a midnight church service, yeah.
No.
And you
After
stood in the
church
parking.
service.
No, I'm saying, and then you stood in the parking lot discussing with her that you wanted to go take her with you, and I said that was okay.
How many times has
I don't know
Denise
what's-
and Patrick lived with you?
Twice.
What was the reason that they left the first time?
I'm not exactly clear.
So they left and you're not clear why?
Well, you know, you're bringing up something I have not prepared for. Patrick moved back. His parents were ill. He moved into his parents' home. Denise moved back with you because winter was very fierce that time of year, and she was worried about the visitations being shut down because transportation from here to Vancouver was getting very potentially unable to see her son or be with her son. So she said, better that I move back.
Did you, Patrick, and Denise have a menage a trois relationship?
Never.
So let me understand. You are an expert in domestic violence, women's issues, shelters, all of these kinds of things. And yet, when there was a supposed family issue with my family, which would be Denise and Ezekiel, what would be the reason that you would not want to counsel me, as you said that you sometimes counsel men as well?
There was never a request on your part to be counseled.
But you're the expert.
I'm just saying, you never made a request. Your family did. You did not. We go by people asking for that help.
So-
It's free.
So if there is a domestic violence situation with families and you're called in to give whatever kind of expertise that you have, you would not allow a member of the family even to contact that family member and ask if they wanted counseling, but you're the expert. Is that your testimony?
I don't understand your question.
The question is, why, if you're a family counseling expert in
Yes.
domestic violence and know all this about shelters and are concerned about women's issues, and you're not a man-hater and you didn't have a menage a trois relationship between
Get to
Patrick
the
and
point, would you please?
Yeah.
What's
why
the
then would
question?
you not want to counsel the father of the child that you say is striking out at her? I don't understand. Why are you so selective?
We didn't select. We go on the basis of referrals from the family. And you never asked, and you did not ask for the service.
Next question, please.
Please.
Isn't
Next
it-
question, please.
isn't it
Next
true-
question, please.
I'm attempting to ask the question.
In another topic.
Isn't it true that the reason has nothing to do with what you're saying now, but because if Miss Martin somehow or another is not able to complete her projects, you lose thousands.
That is not true.
You have a vested interest with her. Is that not true?
She is my friend.
She's your friend. So she's your friend and not your business partner.
She's my business partner, but she's
So as
first
a
my friend.
so as a business partner, if her business projects go south because maybe she's in prison for being an accessory to a domestic sexual assault on my son, your investment goes south too, doesn't it?
I don't think you're making any sense to me. I'm sorry. But of course, you're,
So
Seeing it
let me
that way.
rephrase the question.
yeah, rephrase it,
If
please.
Denise's business prospects go south because of some kind of a criminal charge that imprisons her, does not your investment with her go south as well?
No,
Oh, explain why that would be, please.
because I'm my own person, sir.
But you're invested in her.
I'm invested in everybody right now.
In everybody?
Yes. I want the world to be free of violence. That's why I've worked 35 years to help families stop being abusive. You have not stopped that, sir.
So what about Ezekiel?
What about it? What are you asking?
I'm asking if there's been violence that you can't substantiate here because it's just hearsay from Miss Martin, perpetuated against him by Patrick McEachran. Why would you not at least say, let me investigate this? I need to find out what's going on, since my own grandson is there too.
What
Yeah.
evidence is there of
Yeah.
violence being perpetrated against Ezekiel? What evidence is there?
Well, I saw when I was living there
Okay,
numerous times.
is this witness supposed to know what you saw?
No, but she says that she
What
didn't.
evidence is there that he was a victim?
What evidence is there that I've been abusive to him?
No, that's my question. You answer that one. Because you keep bringing up this fact, and I keep asking myself, well, what is it here that I need to focus on? Because you keep saying that
The game called Kill Patrick,
Yeah.
where they're playing squirt gun games with naked little boys, I just don't think that's proper. I don't think it's proper for little boys to be naked on a trampoline and him squirting them with a hose, because it's dangerous and slippery.
So is that
This
the
is
ab-
abuse, but she won't investigate
so
that.
that's the abusive conduct that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm to answer.
No, let's get a question. I need
The
that
question is, why would you not investigate those kinds of things that actually happen versus hearsay that you do not know and won't help me with any kind of counseling?
Okay, so the question is, do you have any personal knowledge of what actually happened? She has to have personal knowledge of what actually happened. In order
Do you have any personal knowledge of a game called Kill Patrick?
She already testified she did not.
Okay. Do you have any personal knowledge of your son being naked in the house? with
Grandson.
Your grandson being naked playing with Patrick?
No, I do not. have
Are you
person-
going? Let me ask you this question: will you ask him about it when you leave here today?
That's possible.
Possible.
Well, is it part of this trial?
So it only would have to be part of the trial before you'd be interested if your kid had been in a unsavory situation with a grown man?
I'm very interested in my grandson's welfare, sir, and I'm there very much with him the whole time.
But the question was,
I don't leave him there.
What evidence is there that
No,
her grandson was in an unsavory situation with Patrick?
Your Honor, when I was there, the child came downstairs, butt naked, dangling, and I asked him, "Why don't you have your clothes on? What are you doing?" He says, "Well, we're playing Kilpatrick." I said, "Go put your clothes on."
This was Rowan?
Yes, her grandson.
So you personally observed Rowan come down the stairs with no clothes on?
Absolutely, and so did she.
Okay.
I reported to Child
Do you have any
Protective
personal knowledge
Services.
of that?
No.
All right, next question.
So my question then would be, is you may not ask him about that, just so that
Next
you'd be
question,
clear.
please. That's all this line of questioning.
You say that you're not married?
I testified.
How long has it been since you've been divorced?
Let's see, 76.
Why is it relevant, sir?
Yeah.
Why is it relevant?
What's
How
it-
long this woman's been divorced or not?
It's relevant because my understanding, through my son Ezekiel, is that this lady and this woman and Patrick had unsavory conduct in the bedroom in her house.
You've already asked the question whether they had a threesome, and she said no, they didn't. So,
Okay.
question's been asked and answered. Let's move on.
No further questions at this time.
Anything further from this witness, Ms.?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few. How long have you known Patrick McEachran?
Same length of time as I've known you.
You've had many interactions with this man.
Yes, I have.
Have you ever been concerned about leaving your grandson with Ezekiel, or any child in our circle?
Not at all.
You never had any concerns that Patrick might be inappropriate with any child?
I have not had that concern.
Earlier, you testified about Ezekiel's behaviors towards me.
Yes.
Very abusive, scary behaviors
Yes.
for a 4-year-old. Has that pattern continued in the last 14 months?
That pattern has very much changed in the last 14 months over the period of time that he has not been on this weekend visitation with his father. And he has a lot more positive interactions with you almost all the time. He has, sometimes gets impulsive, but so does my grandson. And they're kids, they're 7 years old.
Have you heard Ezekiel call me any obscenities since Mr. Gibson was removed from his life?
I have not been hearing that language.
Prior to the restraining order that's now in place, did you witness Ezekiel having physical, medical challenges of any kind?
Physical medical challenge?
Physical/medical challenges.
He has had the problems with his digestion. I've seen that and understood it's very painful for him.
Was he incontinent?
He has been.
Are those symptoms ever connected to children in a domestic violence situation?
I've talked to mothers in those situations on a not regular basis, but it's not uncommon, and as well as, women who come in who have had that experience back when their children were growing up.
In the last 2 months, have you seen Ezekiel doubled over in pain?
I have not.
Have you seen him crap his pants?
I'm not aware of in the last 2 months of that happening, no.
Was your grandson diagnosed with some medical challenges recently?
had a broken arm.
Previous to that,
Oh, let me think. I'm sorry, they've changed the topic.
sorry.
Just in terms of his own father situation,
Does he have any challenges with diabetes?
no.
He's not on a different diet? As the grandmother of a 7-year-old, does your grandson ever run around the house in his underwear?
Yes, he does.
Is that okay with you?
On the circumstances that he does it, yes, it can be.
Does his mother let him run around naked?
No.
Do you believe that he ran down to Mr. Gibson dangling naked?
She wasn't there. She can't.
I wasn't there.
She can't speculate as to what
Yeah.
happened.
I can't.
When Mr. Gibson asked you about when you became aware that there were sexual abuse allegations, and we believed your answer to reflect today.
Right.
Is that accurate?
Pretty much that I can recall.
Did you have any knowledge of Mr. Gibson's testimony in criminal court?
I did.
Objection.
Basis?
She was not there.
How did you have any knowledge, ma'am?
Pardon?
How did you have knowledge of his testimony in
Because I
criminal court if you
heard from
weren't there?
Patrick, I just heard from Patrick and Denise that,
Objection sustained. Seriously.
okay.
So, Patrick and I being intimately in your life, is that correct?
Yes.
Continually for
Yes,
10
yes,
years.
I know both of you.
Did either of us share with you after the trial that Mr. Gibson was claiming that that he told the jury that Patrick molested his son?
Yes, I did hear
Objection.
that from
Hearsay.
hearsay.
Sustained.
Wasn't there.
Okay. I'm trying to think how to formulate the question so it doesn't get thrown out. So, based on hearsay, Mr. McEachern and I told you that he was alleging that Patrick sexually abused Ezekiel.
Yes.
Based on hearsay.
Well,
You can't ask the question that was based on hearsay.
But Your Honor,
so I'm living in her home. I come home from a criminal
I
trial.
don't want to hear you
can't tell-
testify. I
Okay.
want to hear you ask the witness a question.
Never mind. Did Mr. Gibson ever request counseling from the agency you worked with?
She answered that
No,
two,
I
three
did,
times.
yeah.
Next question.
I think I'm done with this witness, Your Honor.
Anything in regards to what she brought up?
yes,
In regards to what she just brought up?
yes.
Go ahead.
She just asked a question regarding her knowledge of sexual molestation at the trial in April 6th and 7th, when Ms. Broussard just testified that she just learned about this, 10 minutes ago?
You're asking me the question?
I don't understand. Why would she ask her about a question around sexual molestation, that she knew about this, that they told her about it?
Ask her a question.
Yeah, okay. So you testified that you just now recently, very recently, learned about the sexual molestation with Patrick and my son and the dangling of your naked grandson. Yet she just asked you about knowledge of that in April, which is correct. April or now?
April, I think.
So then you lied under testimony.
I forgot under testimony,
Oh, I see.
but I.
What else if you forgot under testimony?
That's the one I think is the most apparent. I don't think I've been attempting to forget anything.
Did you
but
forget to report Patrick too?
He never needed to be reported,
Really?
really.
No further questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we were talking about the YouTube videos, right?
I think we completed that, didn't we?
Right, and that's when the witness testified, so let's continue your testimony.
I'm trying to get my thoughts on where I was before we did the evidence collection.
You were,
Can you help me?
Objection.
I want her to start where we left off, to keep my notes in order so we don't go over things twice. Oh, you're on the, Mr. Gibson's on the phone with the producer from Steve Wilco Show. You don't feel safe, you go next door, you return. This is where you make a decision to go to a shelter in St. Helens, which she knows is out of state, but after calling 20 shelters, it's the only one available to her. Where you left off.
Okay. We lived in the shelter for 2 weeks. It was a marvelous place, lots of children, secure playground, lots of resources for me. Ezekiel loved it there. And of course, they were closing in 2 weeks and everybody had to clear out, so now I'm looking for another bed. There are no shelters. However, in the 9 months previous to that, Mr. McEachern and I had been running with a man named Jerry Reeves, who was worth $130 million at the time. He had $20 million worth of $20 million properties sitting empty, sliding towards foreclosure. And we were negotiating moving on to one of those $1 million properties and creating a model of using our edible landscaping and our healing, natural healing techniques to turn those $20 million homes into healing centers so Mr. Reeves could try and create incomes before he lost them to the bank. So I was able to move on to what was a nearly $900,000 property. There was no lease. There was no money changing hands. It was a business deal in progress with Mr. Reeves, and we remained on that property for 2.5 years.
And that property is the Tualatin property as we referred to it
Yes,
before.
and you will see all of it in the video this evening. However, let's see. You, I believe, asked me, I was told by the court that I had to produce the lease agreement when it was available. I produced a document for Mr. Reeves saying she's fine, she's welcome to stay there until we, figure out our deal or our lease agreement. So once again, I was living on a very nice property, but I was not on the lease. I was not paying to live there. Ms. Bichard and a collection of other business associates helped pay for food, transportation, electric bills, cell phone bills. She was one of a collection of people who are invested in a venture capital situation with my company. So I had the opportunity to stay home with Ezekiel and work my business on the internet and outside in the garden, moving rocks, doing what I do. And Ezekiel, per your demand, I wanted to put him in the Montessori school. You said no, he had to be in public school. And he was enrolled in kindergarten at Beckman Creek Elementary School. I became deeply involved with the school. I volunteered once a week specifically for Ezekiel's kindergarten teacher. I worked and volunteered in the office. I networked with the school psychologist constantly and kind of overstepped the bounds and used him as a consultant on some of Ezekiel's issues. So he was deeply involved in our life. I had a relationship with the principal of the school, Charlotte Morris, because I was working to create the funds to gift the school with a greenhouse dome that she desperately wanted. So we had a business relationship as well as my relationship as a parent, as well as my relationship as a volunteer. I also interacted with Kim Blair, who is the coordinator of the Gifted program. Ezekiel tested 99th percentile in the country for gifted children, so she was now in my life. I was told that amazingly there were wonderful programs available free to me for Ezekiel for gifted children. That funding went away pretty quick, and I paid for, out of my own pocket, 2 different programs for Ezekiel to participate in. He went to an engineering workshop where he had a ball learning to build roller coasters, etc. It was based around, amateur physics. And he was scheduled to go to a symphony with the Gifted Children's program, and I paid for it. Couldn't make it on that day, so they gifted me another workshop where he did similar engineering things. Ezekiel participated in the Tualatin Parks and Rec Mini Hoopers. He was on a basketball team that Mr. McEachern coached. There was no court order saying Mr. Gibson was not welcome to participate in his school or with the Tualatin Parks and Rec at that time, but he chose not to.
Objection, Your Honor.
Continue.
Ezekiel had a rough ride in kindergarten. This was prior to our trip to see Judge Alex, and he was being bullied. And I was in discussion with the school psychologist constantly. I was called by the school a couple of times, and they admitted there had been a problem, that Ezekiel had been the victim. Here's how we handled it. And they had one of the most amazing programs in the country for dealing with bullying. So I spent more time with Zach Dietz, the school psychologist.
What's his name?
Zach Dietz, D-E-E-T-S. I got deeply involved in what is their policy on bullying, how are we going to deal with it. And him and I and Inga Rosenau, the kindergarten teacher, were actively involved in all those discussions about the bullying that they admitted Ezekiel was suffering on the playground. I, for all of my professional skills, had no clue how to counsel my son to deal with it. Should I tell him to fight back? Should I tell him to get aggressive? Should I tell him to run away? I really didn't know. So I was buddying up to Mr. Dietz, who I think is the most amazing child psychologist I've ever met. So I overstepped my bounds and went to him frequently to ask for his opinion, which he shared often. The next year, Ezekiel was enrolled in Beckman Creek Primary School. Actually, he went to summer school by his choice. It wasn't because he was behind on anything. It was just kind of a program. If you're bored in the middle of the summer, we got a cool thing going on. And he went to summer school, and it so happened the teacher that taught the summer school program was going to become his first grade teacher, Mrs. Angela Wassam. He liked her. He was kind of sad that he didn't get to. He was very close to Inga Rosenau, and we adopted the chicks that the school had raised, and he was kind of sad that she wasn't going to be his life. But lo and behold, the summer school teacher he liked was now going to be his first grade teacher, and although he'd had a rough ride in kindergarten and wasn't all that excited about returning to Beckman Creek, he was starting to change his attitude about it. I met again with Kim Blair about, she told me that now that all this money had gone away and I was kind of on my own to deal with Ezekiel's gifted needs, she told me about a program for gifted children that she thought was available for free online. Her and I worked back and forth. She kept saying she would find out about it and let me know, and she finally, I believe, told me she could not. She might have been mistaken. She could not find that opportunity. So Ezekiel wasn't really getting any perks as a gifted child in the first grade. And he was not happy there. He had to sit in a classroom with 26 children who sometimes needed to go over the same subject matter nonstop for a week, and he could get it in the first 10 minutes, and he found the whole experience very boring. He was starving. He grew 2 inches in the 2 years that he was enrolled in Beckman Creek Primary School. He's not a child that gets up and eats breakfast, so he didn't get his first snack until lunch break at 11:20. They got 20 minutes to slam down their lunch, and then it was 3:30 until he got home from school before he got something else to eat. And
Why didn't you feed him before he went off to school?
he's not a person that can eat in the morning, and I can put his face in it, but he has a different eating pattern. I eat first thing in the morning. I can't get him to do it. He doesn't feel like eating till 9 or 10 in the morning. So by the time he got home from school at 3:30 in the afternoon, he's had 1 snack in a 9-hour day for a child that's growing so fast I can barely keep clothes on. So his complaints about first grade were...
Why wasn't he eating lunch at the school?
He was. He got 20 minutes to eat a lunch, but for him,
You said it was a snack.
well, whatever he could consume in 20 minutes.
So he had lunch at the school.
He had lunch, yeah. Wasn't a leisurely lunch that he could consume a whole lot, but what he could consume in 20 minutes. But it wasn't enough. He eats nonstop when he's at home, and his growing pattern reflects that that's necessary. He's not overweight, he's not undernourished, but he's hungry. He eats a lot. So his complaints being, and I was deeply involved with the school about his diet, and that he was allergic to wheat and dairy and sugar, and they have lots of policies in place now because of food allergies, and partially because of me and partially because of the many parents dealing with food allergies. By the time he was in the first grade, they took all snacks out of the classrooms for all children because the liability of them serving food to our children with food allergies has become a big problem for the school district. So now lunch is all they get. They used to get some snacks in the classroom, and the school stopped that entire policy. Okay, so we're in first grade, and at the end of the year, 3 weeks before the year is over, Ezekiel's first grade teacher gets cancer. It is delivered to the students. We all go to a party to say goodbye to her. It's devastating, it's emotional, and now he's losing the teacher that he's bonded with, and he has a collection of substitutes, and they just kind of get through the rest of the year. During his first grade experience was when I successfully got a restraining order against Mr. Gibson in this county. And that restraining order restrained him now from having any contact with Ezekiel on the school grounds. So it was my obligation to take that restraining order to the school, make sure it was on record, make sure they all knew that he was not legally allowed to pick the child up. So because of that, Zach Dietz Charlotte Morris, Angela Wassam, Kim Blair, and the head secretary at the time, Linda, I don't recall her last name, she retired when her husband died. All 5 of those people were aware the restraining order was in place, that Mr. Gibson was not welcome on the property, and they were asked, as a team that spent every day with Ezekiel, to look for flags. This is a stressed child. He's in a stressful situation. He's restrained. Keep an eye on him. And they all agreed to observe to see how he was handling this stress. There had been some issues of his incontinence at school, and I had interacted with the school nurse, the principal, the teacher, and Zach Dietz once again. We had come up with a plan of Zach Dietz being the go-to guy if Ezekiel had an accident at school, and we worked on a way to help him deal with that and feel comfortable with that. Mr. Dietz, now knowing that a 6-year-old is incontinent and needing help at school, is voluntarily getting more involved as a required reporter. He's now getting more interested. And so he kept a very close eye on Ezekiel and had numerous conversations with me. He was aware of what was going on in the child's life. Of course, from my perspective, he had no contact with Mr. Gibson. In the 1st grade, Ezekiel had 1 accident. This was prior to the restraining order coming into place. The teacher tried to engage him because she could smell it. He wasn't comfortable sharing it with her, and he attempted to handle it himself. In the time since the restraining order, Ezekiel had no accidents at school. And other than the news that his teacher was seriously ill with cancer, it was a pretty uneventful year. Now we're in summer, so he leaves 1st grade, it's 2010. In, I believe it's July of 2010, I got a call from Mr. Gibson from a hospital. I don't know what hospital he's in. We're not best buds at this point. He's called me to tell me that he is in the hospital. He's had an episode, which he told me about later. I didn't during that phone call. I didn't really know all that had happened to him, but he's in a hospital. He seems very anxious. He tells me that he's been diagnosed with borderline diabetes, and he tells me that I had to call you. And during that conversation, he apologized to me for years of battering me about my health food commitment. And that you were right in his delightful, charming, I'm going to cop to something, asked me if I would help him. Doctor wants him to detox, do the Denise and Patrick thing. Would I help him? Absolutely. I offered to not only help him, but to pay for everything. I offered to do the detox with him, because in my experience of helping other individuals detox, there's nothing more supportive than doing it as well, instead of just standing over them telling them how to do it. And I committed to do that. Mr. McEachern's mother died in December of 2009. In February of 2010, his father committed suicide out of grief, could not live with that. And now there was an inheritance on the horizon for Mr. McEachern. Some of that money came down the pike. It took a while to get it all out. It was a total of $65,000, but some of it cut loose. And I believe we had like $18,000 to manipulate, to work with there. And Mr. McEachern agreed to have Mr. Gibson move into the house. He agreed to pay for all the detox, everything for all of us. He agreed to pay Mr. Gibson's friend Bob to work on his Mercedes that was broken down in our driveway. He agreed to pay for Mr. Gibson to see Dr. Carlos Rosa, which is $100 a pop. And he agreed to pay for everything. Mr. Gibson was not asked to pay for any bills or do anything except work on his health in the time that he was to live in our house. Mr. Gibson interacted with me. He stayed at the house. He hadn't moved in yet. I think, maybe I'm confused, but he stayed there for a few weeks, and then finally it was discussed, and he was invited to move in because at this time Arliss had told him she needed the house back. That apparently his bid to buy it had not panned out. She was going to rent it. Now he's needing somewhere to live. He's having an awakening that maybe my expertise means something. He's asking for help. So we've all agreed he's going to move in. During that time, now that Mr. McEachern had a few finances, Mr. McEachern chose to go to California on business and vacation for about 3 weeks. No one ever told Mr. Gibson that Mr. McEachern was moving, or that he could move in and become the alpha male, that I was going to be his girlfriend. Nothing. We had discussed him moving in to get well and for us to try, for Ezekiel's sake, to see if we could co-parent, that it would be good for Ezekiel to have Dad under the roof. He was missing him. It would be very good for the two of them to be together in this manner. During that time, it was exactly 1 month from the time Mr. Gibson's truck full of belongings showed up to the time that he left with the police on October 13th. During that time, he worked very hard. He worked in the garden, he shampooed the carpets, he was of great service. Him and Mr. McEachern were working there. What has been a friendship off and on over the years. Ezekiel was happy, kind of tiptoeing around all this, but certainly thrilled and trying to orchestrate a...
Okay, so Mr. Gibson moved out in October when the police came over?
Yes, he was...
That's inaccurate. September 14th.
You're going to have your turn.
Mr. Gibson's correct. I was inaccurate. It was... September 13th was his 1 month anniversary of living there.
So he moved in August and
Yeah.
he was
The police
taken away in
thing
September.
happened on the 13th, I believe, of September, and he was escorted off the property, and he hasn't been back.
Okay, move on, please.
Okay? So, I came here, and I asked for a restraining order. Oh, no, because we haven't gotten to what happened yet. Okay. So, Mr. McEachern has returned from California, so all three of us are once again in the house. Over the course of, let's see, Ezekiel is, this is 2010 in September, so he's 6. Since he was 10 months old, Mr. McEachern has interacted in his life constantly. Been the godfather, a player in my life, lived in the house with me and Ezekiel. He is deeply involved. And Mr. McEachern and I had a way of dealing with Ezekiel when he would go off on me. And we found over much experience that if you would just not react, back off, let him emote, do whatever he knew, go to his room, whatever, that pretty much 100% of the time he would come back, apologize, be calm, and we could move on. So this is the way we dealt with what was going on with Ezekiel for the years that Mr. Gibson had visitations. On the night of September 13th, as Mr. Gibson described, he was sitting on the couch. He now had the bottom half of the house. All of his he had like a living room set up where he did have some view of the bathroom, and he was sitting there watching TV and witnessed this. He had a room downstairs. Ezekiel had a room next to that room, and they had their own bathroom. So the downstairs was kind of the man cave, and I had a bedroom on the top floor. Mr. McEachern had a bedroom on the middle floor, and so they got to have a relationship for the first time in a while. However, based on what I've described to you that I've gone through for the past 8+ years with this man, I did not give him permission to run over me as the custodial parent of this child. We didn't talk about that when we moved into the house. He still had a court order that said he got him on every other weekend. I had him the rest of the time, and I pretty much expected that he was a guest in my home. We were paying for everything. After all the things he had accused me of and we'd been through, that he would respect pretty much my parenting choices. It wasn't discussed. It was too delicate to discuss, in my opinion, but I was prepared to advocate for that. So on this particular evening, I think his testimony was accurate, that I wanted Ezekiel to get in the bathtub, and he started his routine. He was swinging at me. He never really connects. Once in a while he connected, but he was, just air punching, which I felt is inappropriate. He was just back talking and flat saying no, he wasn't going to do it. It's important for me to help you understand the layout of that room for what's about to happen next. I was in the bathroom and off to one side. I was about 4 feet from Ezekiel, who was almost standing in the doorway of the bathroom. He was a few feet stepped back from that. So I was 4 feet from Ezekiel, and Ezekiel was probably 3 feet from the door jamb. So we're in the bathroom together. He's, doing his combative, talking trash to mama. And before I could comment or react, Mr. Gibson is standing in the doorway of the bathroom, admonishing his son, or you don't treat your mother that way. And Ezekiel's now talking back to him. And Mr. Gibson started to take a step and lean towards the child and said, "Oh no, I'm your father, you're not going to talk to me that way." In that very big split second of my life, after the exorcism thing in Vancouver, him dragging the child up the stairs, all of that, my experience with him, I made the decision that I'm going to close the gap and get between Wardell before he can actually get a hold of the child. I made that decision because I was afraid of what Ezekiel might do. This was the first time I believed that he had really said what he wanted to say to his father, and I had no idea what he might do if Wardell actually reached out and grabbed him. So I decided I'm going to close the gap. This is not going to be pretty. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to close the gap and get in between them. Before I could get that done, I heard Mr. McEachern coming down the stairs. He had been asleep in his room, which is on the second level. He heard claimed that, this woke him up. He starts coming down the stairs, and I hear him coming. Oh my God. Oh my God, this is going to be not good. Not good. Mr. McEachern came up behind Mr. Gibson. So Mr. Gibson is facing into the bathroom, facing Ezekiel. Mr. McEachern came up behind him. And what I heard, I couldn't see what happened, but what I heard was Mr. McEachern saying, just back off. Ezekiel screaming to Wardell, get away from me, back up, whatever. And Mr. McEachern says, just back up, Wardell. Just back up and let him have some space. So Ezekiel's 2 feet from Wardell, I'm about 4 feet from Wardell, and what I saw next, I couldn't see Mr. McEachern because he was on the other side of the door jamb, and from my vantage point, I couldn't see him. I knew he was there, I could hear him. I saw Mr. Gibson spin around. I saw him face Mr. McEachern, and now I'm closing the gap. I'm trying to grab my son, and I see him put his nose in Mr. McEachern's face and run him into the door jamb between the walk-in closet and the door that exits that room.
Objection, Your Honor. This whole line of what she's doing now was in the criminal trial. This was found out to be not true, and I was acquitted of that.
Well, the fact that you may have been acquitted in a criminal case is not conclusive as to evidence that can be submitted in a case of this nature, because the burden of proof in this nature is not as great as it is in a criminal case.
Okay? I will get to cross-examining.
So I did not see any punches thrown. I saw Mr. Gibson run Mr. McEachern into a wall. I had experienced this as one of the things that I consider domestic violence. This 260-pound man had done it to me often. Never laid a mark on me.
Just testify as to what happened.
Okay, so this has happened to me before. I saw it happen. The moment I saw it happen, I grabbed Ezekiel, closed the door, so him and I were alone in the bathroom, and then whatever was happening with them. It became obvious to me that they ended up in the middle bathroom because I could hear bodies banging against the wall. I could hear, what is obviously a fight. So I decide I'm going to call 911. I had my cell phone in my back pocket. I dialed 911. And as soon as the Clackamas County, and I don't live in Clackamas County, I live 2 feet from the Clackamas County border. As soon as the Clackamas County dispatcher came on, Ezekiel went berserk. I'm trying to talk to the dispatcher, and Ezekiel's screaming that he didn't want his father to go to jail. I am having such a difficulty with him screaming that I can't deal with the 911 operator. I made the decision to hang up on her because I had already given her the address, and I knew that police would be coming. So I hung up on her, and I set out to try and calm my son down so that I could decide whether I wanted to leave the house or whatever and call 911 back. The ruckus is still going on. And Ezekiel and I are now, I have exited the bathroom, but we are now behind a closed door in what was Mr. Gibson's living area there, and I'm working with my son. We're still listening to walls banging, etc. I decide that maybe being in the house with whatever they got going on, I'm not witnessing it, but it's still going on, and I haven't been able to call the 911 lady back yet. I'm assuming they'll call me back. And I decide I'm not feeling safe there. I know that the sliding glass door to get out of that room is broken, and I may struggle there. So I make the decision to open the door, try and get to the next way to get out of the house, which had been the second level and out the garage. So I'm pursuing that. I'm believing that the police are on the way, and therefore the safest place for me is to be in the driveway where they're going to arrive. So I'm working to get there. Halfway up the stairs, I'm not clear now where really they are. And I'm afraid of bumping into them and whatever they got going on. So I decide to keep going to the 3rd floor and take Ezekiel into my bedroom and try and wait or deal with 911 or whatever, because he's starting to calm down. I'm in the bedroom with Ezekiel, and I now hear Wardell and Patrick on the landing. Wardell is downstairs, apparently. Patrick's on the landing, telling him you can't come up. And Wardell's saying, I just want to see my son. And Mr. McEachern's saying, that's not happening. So I came out to witness for myself. I just had to step out my bedroom door, and I could see that landing. I saw Mr. McEachern coming up. I saw Mr. McEachern, I saw Mr. Gibson coming up from the bottom floor. I saw Mr. McEachern on the landing, and something transpired. I'm not clear what I saw. Maybe Mr. McEachern, pushed him, kicked him, something, whatever. He would not allow him to come up. So I went back in the bedroom, closed the door, and was there with Ezekiel. Then it gets quiet again. And I'm waiting, and I still haven't gotten a call back from 911. I have no idea how much time has passed, but it seems like an awful lot. But now we're hearing sirens. I'm hearing police cars. So I decided to take Ezekiel and head to the garage, because I believe they're going to be rolling into the driveway any minute. Now I get a call back from 911. This time it's Washington County 911, which is apparently what took so long. There was some jurisdiction issues, and we ended up with a lot of different agencies there that night. But they assure me...
Okay, so you're trying to get outside. What happened?
Okay, so I'm in the garage now. I'm on the phone with 911, and I hear police sirens, but nobody's showing up. And it's not an easy property to find, so I'm on the phone trying to give them directions, etc., etc. So then 911 has assured me the police are on the way, that they know where they're going, and they should be there any minute. So I'm in the garage, and I'm not feeling safe, so I decide to go out to the driveway. I get to the driveway. I still don't know really what's happening. I'm hearing the sirens, so I decide to go around to the side of the house where it's a little darker, where I can wait, see the driveway, and know the police have arrived. I have no clue yet where Wardell is, where Patrick is, what's transpired between them, and all of a sudden it's very quiet. I'm still concerned. So I'm out by the trampoline. It's dark. I have Ezekiel, who's calmed down some. And Wardell comes out from around the back of the house, past the labyrinth, and up to the area by the trampoline where I am with Ezekiel. And he approaches us, and Ezekiel starts crying now. He's upset. Wardell wants to hold him, and I allowed it, thinking that if we could just keep this situation sedate, the police will be here any minute. In those few seconds that he had Ezekiel on his lap, he told him, and I quote, "Your mother and Patrick tried to murder me because they called the police, and police shoot black men." I grabbed Ezekiel out of his lap, said, "No way, we're not doing that." Mr. Gibson grabbed a lawn chair, he ran around us, and he ran out to the driveway and sat down in the chair. I ran around the back of the house, now knowing that Mr. Gibson was in the driveway. I ran the back of the house, entered the house with the child, went to my bedroom, and waited for the police. They finally showed up, whatever. I still have no idea what's transpired beside them. I hear the police coming. I ask Ezekiel to stay in the room. And I go to deal with all this. And what I find is Mr. McEachern on the front porch screaming his head off at Mr. Gibson, who is sitting calmly in a lawn chair talking on the cell phone. Now I see the police coming down the driveway, it's a long driveway, and see them coming. I'm trying to convince Mr. McEachern that him raging when the police pull up is not going to go well. He's still screaming, "You're a liar," and Mr. Gibson's in the chair, and the police pull up, and this is what they witness. Mr. McEachern's angry, Mr. Gibson's calm as a cucumber in a lawn chair in the driveway. I go out thinking that since I'm the one that called 911, they're going to want to talk to me, and nobody wants anything to do with me. So I just leave. I assume they'll come get me if they want information, and I go stay with my son. Nobody ever comes to talk to me for a while, and so I'm starting to get concerned that my opinion isn't in the mix here, so I go out looking again. I end up talking, there's so many officers. Apparently there's sheriffs from Washington County and sheriffs from Clackamas County, and they're trying to figure out who's in charge, and there's so many of them. And that's important, and I'll tell you why later. So I go out, there's a pack of them, and I go out to try and engage, and they're kind of blowing me off. And so I'm saying, "You're going to leave him here with us." I get it. And they're like, it sounds like they're not going to arrest Mr. Gibson. And I'm thinking about how the rest of the night's going to go with all of us in the house. So I start getting a little testy with the officers about, I've been through this a million times. He's in the driveway. He tells the police a wonderful story. Then I become the bad guy. And I'm, bitching.
So what happened?
So they changed. And they start assuring me that, no, they're going to haul him out. And I said, okay. So I left. So now I'm back in the house, and I've moved Ezekiel down to his bedroom in the basement. I've been approached by Deputy Mark Shaw wanting to know if I have a license, and I said yes, and I would get that for him. I had another police officer in the house. And then the next thing I know, I waited a long time, and then Deputy Shaw comes down. I'm in the bedroom with Ezekiel. Deputy Shaw comes down, and like 2 other police officers, and he's trying to lure me out of the room. My son's alone with like 3 police officers, and he wants me to leave the room with him to go get this driver's license. I said, I'm not comfortable with that. I want to know if my son's comfortable being alone with 3 police officers. I asked Ezekiel. He said he would be fine. I said, sure, let's go. And I left with Mark Shaw to go find my license, then had a discussion with him of what my understanding of the events were. And Ezekiel had a discussion with some police officers.
Okay, wrap it up, please.
Mr. Gibson was arrested, and he was escorted off the property. I don't even know who took him. One county or the other took him.
Okay, anything further?
So that's the end of that incident. So I set out to get a restraining order. I came here. I filed the paperwork appropriately. I was given a hearing time and date. And I had no idea where Mr. Gibson was. So I could not serve him to let him know, so I emailed him. And I read that email. He said he wasn't coming to the hearing. I was a professional killer. He was in hiding. So I showed up on October 6th, 2010, and stood in front of Commissioner Scheinberg and was granted a restraining order. That was, I believe I said, October 6th, 2010. On October 19th, 2010, at approximately 2 p.m., there's a caller ID on my cell phone, and I recognize it to be the court number, and I answer the phone, and it was you, telling me that Mr. Gibson had been camping in your courtroom all day, demanding your attention, and if I was willing, you were willing to conduct a hearing over the phone, and I said yes. During that conversation, he did tell you that he had been in hiding because we were professional killers. Believe me, I remember it like it was yesterday. He went through a lot of gyrations about his Mercedes. He talked about dishes and towels, and we went through all this angst, and an order was written about him removing his stuff from my property. Which happened. His Mercedes disappeared, and then you've heard about the whole crew coming to get his stuff. We don't need to go into all of that. And then we start preparing for a criminal trial, which was scheduled for October 2010. Then Miss, I know her as Jordan, was not available to testify for him, so he opted to let the trial be postponed. So we changed all of our arrangements here, and then we were looking at a trial date in March, and stuff happened in March, and then his trial was finally permanently set for April 6th, 2011. In the meantime, I had filed a motion for contempt. It was my opinion that Mr. Gibson owed me $9,000 in child support, and I legally filed papers to hold him in contempt. And in March, I believe it was the 24th, we had a hearing. He was found in contempt of court for $9,000. He paid $45,000. Actually, it was early in March that was found, and on the 24th, he was to deliver $4,500 in a cashier's check or prepare to go to jail that day. I couldn't get the car to start. Mr. McEachern couldn't get the car to start. I called your office and said I can't get there. We made arrangements. Long story short, I worked my way up there on the bus, and the check had been left for me. And I got $4,500 towards a $9,000 contempt, and we have never finished that discussion on how I might get that other $4,500 or subsequential. We also discussed in that hearing that the child support order is still in place, and if Mr. McEachern can't afford it, he was to file, as he's been told at least 3 times, an updated financial report so his child support could be amended. But in the meantime, the order stood, and he needed to keep paying.
You mean Mr. Gibson, not Mr.
Yes, I'm
McEachern?
sorry. I'm sorry. I am tired. I have never received another dime from Mr. Gibson. He told Lynn Gibson that he didn't owe me any more child support. As I testified, Lynn Gibson started to interact with me, for him, brought Christmas presents, spent time at Christmas, birthday party. I called and asked for clothes because I wasn't receiving any child support. I figured I'd see what they might fork over. I got clothes, so she had become part of my life. And we had been friendly in the course of, she's still married to him. They have a relationship like Patrick and I. They're still friends. They support each other.
That's not true, Your Honor.
May I continue?
Yes.
Okay, so I started communicating with her by email, by phone, by text. She came. She's lent me money. She involved. She had no idea that there was a criminal trial or that he was in danger of going to jail. She had no idea that any of this was going on. Eventually, she tried to get some help for me with Pastor Hardy, who read his recommendation into the record. She approached him and asked him to get involved in this situation.
This is hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. At some point, I asked Lynn Gibson if she would testify for me in this case, since she had been in the home, witnessed our parenting, witnessed Ezekiel, had firsthand information for how Ezekiel was doing in the home with us, with Wardell out of the picture, and she said yes. The day that we had the 4,500 or go to jail hearing, Lynn Gibson called your clerk and told her that should I need her to testify, she was available by phone.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
I asked her permission to put her on a witness list for a trial, for the impending trial. She asked me if she could testify because she's still legally married to him. We talked about that. We talked about what she might testify to.
She's not
She
here,
agreed.
so
She agreed.
she's coming tomorrow. What she and you discussed is not relevant.
She changed her whole testimony Sunday night. She won't be here.
Okay?
Judge,
Don't interject.
I think I am done with my testimony.
Okay?
okay. Wow. Where to begin? A couple of things I would, if I could, clear up. If the court is interested in her testimony about the events of September 14th, not 13th, when I was arrested and then maliciously prosecuted. This is a CD of the 911 call. If the court's interested, I have it. If not, that's okay. She keeps talking about my marriage to Lynn Gibson. I was married to Lynn Gibson. I got married to Lynn Gibson in 1974.
Mr. Gibson?
Did you know that in 1985, Lynn Gibson sent divorce decree paperwork from her attorney to my address in Sacramento, California?
I'm really not interested in your divorce with Lynn Gibson or anything else regarding Lynn Gibson. Okay?
I was just going to say I've got documentation about
Not
that.
interested.
Okay, all right,
It's not
fine, all
relevant
right.
to this proceeding. And,
Okay. Well, she keeps bringing it up, and I wanted to make sure that. Okay, let's go back to your testimony, starting with your church in Wilsonville. Could you give me the name of that church?
The Living Enrichment Center.
And there was a female pastor there?
Excuse me, the Living what?
Enrichment Center?
Enrichment, thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
And the name of the lady that was the pastor?
Reverend Dr. Mary Mannon Morrissey.
Mary Morrissey?
Reverend Dr. Mary Mannon Morrissey.
Could you tell me what was the demise of that particular congregation, if you know?
Oh, yeah. The minister and her husband accepted $10 million worth of loans from the congregation. Long story short, it didn't go well, and they lost their 30,000 square foot church.
Was she not charged with embezzlement?
No, her husband was.
Okay. In 2002 or 2000, you mentioned that in the events surrounding the stroke of my mother, that I was unemployed. and that we were struggling for money. Isn't it true that I was still working for Electric Mobility and had taken a leave of absence for the events around my mother's death?
No. You were fired for being late all the time.
That's your testimony?
That's that was my understanding. So yes, that's my
Is it
testimony.
not true that within 3 weeks of my mother's death, I went back to work for Electric Mobility?
That's not my remembrance.
Is it not true that you continually persuaded me, or attempted to persuade me, and ultimately did persuade me to quit working for Electric Mobility, to join forces with you and be the national director of Blue Sky Domes?
No, that's not my recollection.
That's not your recollection. Do you know a bearded gentleman by the name of Bill?
I'm not disputing that you went to work for Blue Sky Domes. It's not my understanding that was the time frame that you had your deal with Mr. Fahey.
So you're not sure whether or not so you're saying that you have no recollection of you asking me to stop working for Electric Mobility and to come to work for Blue Sky Domes?
No, I did not ask you to leave your job. When you were jobless, I did take you to Mr. Fahey and say, this man is an amazing salesman. You might consider having him represent your domes.
You said that sometime in January of 2002 that I went with you to someplace in Southwest Washington to go to a bank or some other lending institution, and that we got a loan. Is that your testimony?
Almost. The lender was from Southwest Washington and a friend of mine, but the transaction actually happened, to my recollection. No, you're right. That was in, I'm trying to remember that now. We drove up to Brody's, and she drove to the bank with us. So you're right. That was a Southwest Washington city where that transaction happened in front of a bank camera.
So it's your testimony that I got a loan from that bank in Southwest Washington.
No, that's not my testimony.
Well, you just said that we got a loan and it was on bank cameras.
Exactly. The loan was a direct personal loan from Rhodey. No, I might not get her last name correctly. So my friend Rhodey agreed to lend us $12,000, and it was a cashier's check, and she wanted it done in the bank so that there would be some documentation. The loan was...
Okay, you guys.
Okay, never mind.
Why is,
Well,
Okay.
why is it relevant?
Because I never got a loan. Because
there's
what she wanted to do is attach my mother's house for collateral against the loan, and I refused and walked out.
Okay, so you're
she-
saying there was no $10,000?
Yeah, produced some loan documents that showed that we got a loan.
You're disputing there was a $10,000 loan.
Never.
Okay, she testified there was, you're saying there wasn't, so you're right. Do you have any documentation?
Do you have any documentation?
$10,000 loan?
I can get Ms. Rhodey, I believe it's Schilling, to testify by phone tomorrow to tell us that she had that experience with us.
And my name is written, my signature is
I
written.
really don't want to go there, so let's move on to more important issues.
You mentioned that that you had some kind of counseling with my mother's pastor, Reverend Johnson,
No, we did.
that had to do with the death surrounding my mother.
No, I don't believe that's what I said.
You mentioned that my
Would
brother...
you like me to clarify?
Yes, I would.
No, I don't need any
You don't
further
care?
clarification.
Okay.
This was during one of those time periods where you said that you were leaving till someone from the church came to intervene. Pastor Johnson did come into the scene. He counseled them, meaning you and Mr. Gibson. Okay, that was the testimony. You got questions regarding that testimony?
Well, yeah, I just, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, because what I'm here for is to gain custody, of my child. And, you know, it's pretty clear that Ms. Martin and I do not get along. I think the court can see that. And we've had many episodes, many disagreements, and although I disagree with her version of events and many of these kinds of things, but suffice it to say that we don't get along, and it was probably a mistake for us to ever be together. Having said that, there are some things that she said that are, to me, are just, you know, blatant lies. I just don't want to focus on it. Her going from shelter to shelter to shelter because I'm so-called abusive, her coming back all the time and going again, her trying to get me to go on talk shows, to take lie detector tests that I refused under the advice of my attorney, Debbie Fawn-Uribe, as we're in court, her absconding with my child all the time for reasons that are just bizarre to me, this accusation of all of this domestic violence, and there's no proof of evidence of it anywhere, any place, any time.
Is this a closing argument, or is
No,
this
I'm just
something you
saying
want to bring to my
that,
attention right now?
what I'm,
There are some facts that she brought up that I do make note of. There are comments that she's made, you know, in the last several hours that I don't even take notes of. So that's for me to decide what facts are relevant, Mr. Gibson, what I'm going to consider, not consider. The fact that you guys counseled with Reverend Johnson after your mother died, that's not really one of those big facts that I'm going to look at when I review my notes and making the ultimate decision.
Okay.
You know, the fact that she went from shelter to shelter, alleging that she's been abused, those are facts that are on my checklist that I'm going to consider, you know, in making my decision. So yes, there are some testimony, there's some of her testimony that is relevant to my ultimate decision. There's some of her testimony that's not relevant. So if you want to focus on what's relevant, I will respond to that.
Okay.
But as far as this continued dialogue between you and her of interrogating each other about what's not relevant, I'm not going to allow that any longer.
right, and that's my
Okay, so
point.
take
I
it
just,
chronologically, step by step, however
Okay.
you want. If you have another method you want to go about doing it,
May
go
I
ahead.
comment?
No, you cannot comment. Question, please.
okay. You had mentioned too that I did not have a driver's license, and that I was supposedly driving you and Ezekiel around without a driver's license. That was your testimony?
Oh, yes.
I would like to go to exhibit
Okay, so the proper way to rebut her statement is for you to produce a driver's license showing that I've got it. Instead of this continuing questions with her, she's testified that you did. You're saying apparently she's wrong.
Are you aware that in the state of Oregon, if you are behind on your child support, they will suspend your driver's license?
No information about that law.
Not aware of that? Could we go to the evidence, evidence number 22? Exhibit 22.
It's marked for identification. It has not been admitted as an exhibit.
So
I
if
have
Mr.
that.
Mr. Gibson wants to refer to the exhibit, he can.
Yeah, it's, could you pass that to the judge?
No,
No?
she knows better.
Okay.
May I get some more water, Your Honor?
Well, that exhibit has to do with back child support for the state of Oregon. My question to you is, how do you have child support from two different states? If I'm paying child support to the state of Washington as evidenced by payments to you and the $4,500 check, why have you filed for child support illegally in the state of Oregon?
I have not. I'm so glad you asked me that question. Here's what happened. Starting with Judge Pro Tem Juliet Lako, she put a child support order for Clark County for you to pay. However, I was living in Oregon and receiving benefits from Oregon, so Oregon wanted the case because they want to recoup their money for supporting Denise and Ezekiel. So it had nothing to do with me. The state of Washington backed out and let Oregon take over the child support order because that's the state that was providing for me and Ezekiel, and that's the state that was interested in recouping their investment. So they were working off the Vancouver child support order, but their agency chose to chase you for it. And Washington, and I've talked to the gentleman who handled the case in Washington. He told me it was transferred to Oregon. I talked to Rachel, who's handling it in Oregon, and it was a decision between their two agencies that Oregon had jurisdiction over the child support because I was living and receiving benefits in Oregon. And so that had nothing to do with me, and it still has nothing to do with me. There's a court order, and you are still ordered to pay support in Clark County. May I finish?
Continue.
And Oregon is still handling that, and they feel you are in arrears, and that's where we are.
So your testimony is that I should be paying child support to 2 different states?
I don't believe that's what I just said.
You just said that the state of Oregon has taken over jurisdiction. Did that come to Judge Ruley?
They're
Then why did I
taking
pay the $4,500 to the Judge Ruley?
They are now policing the child support order that is in place in this county because I was living in Oregon, receiving benefits there. I don't know the law. The professionals from these 2 states decided that's how it would work.
So then why hasn't the $4,500 been deducted from the state of Oregon since somehow or another?
I'm not responsible for handling that account. It's
Filed.
between you and the state. All I care about is if I get some money to support my son. How the state records it, and if they're not recording it fairly for you, I'd get busy, but that's not my job.
So it's your testimony that it's okay for me to be paying 2 different states
You're
for
not
child
paying
support?
jack, sir. To any
Yeah,
state. I haven't received anything since the $4,500. Shall we do the math on how much you owe me since March 2011?
Yeah, in fact, that is on my checklist here, so do the math tonight, and I'm going to ask you that question tomorrow.
Thank you, Your Honor,
I need to
because
know.
we never finished that contempt hearing
So
about
to answer
that.
your question, Mr. Gibson, yeah, you should have taken the order to Oregon to get credit for it, because they're collecting the same monies.
Yeah. Nobody's
You
doubled
should- You
it.
should have taken it over there and brought it to their attention, otherwise they're not going to come looking for it. I think that's enough for tonight.
I'm exhausted, thank you, Your Honor.
10 o'clock in the morning,
And then we're accepting Ms. Cohen's call at 10, is that correct?
that's correct.
And you would like her to call your chambers?
Yes.
It's done. Thank you, Your Honor.